In today's video, I want to walk you through what metrics you should be tracking in your business as a real estate investor. That way you can measure up if you're doing well or not. Let's dive right in. I think the first thing that makes sense to talk about when going into a video like this is probably going to be your response rate. If you're doing outbound marketing, what sort of return should you be looking for as far as money out, direct mail out, Facebook ads, pay-per-click versus calls and leads back in? So I'm just going to share some of my personal metrics with you. My typical response rate on direct mail is anywhere from 1 to 3%. Now, that doesn't necessarily mean that I'm going to get that every time. Sometimes I might get 0.5%. Other times I might get 6 or 7%. But on an average, on an annual basis, I'm looking at roughly 1 to 3% on the response rate from direct mail. Now, when it comes to my website, I do use an investor carrot site, which we've talked about on here before. And I'm getting roughly a 2 to 4% opt-in rate from traffic, meaning people that are getting a piece of mail from me and going to my website, or that are just Google searching something like, sell my house fast for cash and landing on my site. I will tell you that above and beyond, my number one source of deals when it comes through my website is SEO. So people that are actively looking for what I've got to offer. And that might be as high as 4 to 5%. But realistically, if your website is getting people to fill out and give you their information, somewhere like that 2 to 4%, you're probably doing pretty good. If you're getting dramatically below that, you might want to look at your copy or kind of how it's phrased. I won't dive into this too much, but carrot sites, in my opinion, can read a little bit like, yo, bro, if you're just desperate to unload that house for free, I'll take it from you. And very, very few of my sellers look at their property as a burden. Even if it's a total piece of junk, they tend to view it as their retirement plan. So just make sure that you're maybe cleaning that up if you notice that your response rate isn't great. When it comes to pay-per-click ads, the best way I can describe this is clicks to conversions. So people are Google searching things like we buy houses, sell my house fast, companies who buy houses for cash, and I'm paying to run ads to my website on Google. We're getting roughly a 2 to 3% opt-in rate on those. Last month we had right at 330 clicks. We ended up getting right at 16 leads out of it. So kind of right in line. You do want to keep an eye on that metric though, because if it's dramatically worse, it means your ads might suck. Last but not least, we're going to talk about Facebook ads on the response rate end. And the best metric I can give you if you're running your own Facebook ads is your click-through rate, meaning the amount of people who see an ad and choose to click on it and go visit your site. Ideally, you should be getting 1%. If you're below 1%, it might mean that your copy is off, your headline sucks, or that the image you're using just isn't clicking with people or capturing their attention. One thing to keep in mind when we talk about response rate is it's kind of a dumb metric to focus on a little bit. For instance, I don't care if I get a 10% response rate back on something like direct mail if I don't get any deals out of it, or if all of my leads are hey, I hope you die an early, painful death, right? So what I'm typically looking at is my return on ad spend, or cash out versus cash back in. As far as I'm concerned, if I can spend $1, make 2, 3, 4, 5, I'm thrilled, right? So make sure you don't get caught up in that well, I only got a 0.5%, response rate, but if you were profitable, I'm not upset about that, right? So now that we've talked about response rate, let's talk a little bit about what those responses are going to be. So I own Call Porter, a US-based answering service. They take all of my inbound calls and have for years. And what we've seen, they take north of 10,000 calls a month for companies all around the country, is your leads are going to come in a third, a third, a third. So what do I mean by that? 33% of your people are going to say, hey, take me off your direct mail list. Don't call me again. Basically, I'm not interested, leave me alone. A third of them are going to say, hey, come out, make me a cash offer. I think I'm ready to sell. Let's see what we can do. And the final third are going to be I'm interested, but what would your offer be? Or I've got to check with my tenant to see when they can, meet you to show the property or whatever. We call those follow-ups, meaning something that you're going to need to push towards an appointment to get out there to make that cash offer. So just kind of keep that in mind as you're meeting with people, as you're talking to people. If you're like not getting anybody to appointments, you're gonna be missing out on quite a bit of your deal flow. The next thing that I think makes sense to talk about is your closing percentage. We've talked about generating leads. We've talked about what those leads are gonna want from you. Let's talk about now like what you should be targeting as far as a closing percentage goes. Even like a blind squirrel occasionally is going to get a nut, right? So if you absolutely suck on your appointments, if you're awkward, if you're clunky, if you're just like, hey, here's where I'm at, take it or leave it, you should still be closing at least 10% of the appointments that you go on. It's like the bare minimum that I'm looking for out of my staff. So if they run 10 appointments in a week and they haven't gotten a deal, I'm like, yo, guys, where is it, right? If you're decent or good at talking to people, building rapport, making offers, doing negotiations, that kind of thing, you could be getting as high as 30% of your appointments, meaning that same week of 10 appointments could easily end up being 3 deals if you're skilled in negotiations. Now, having like a good closing percentage on appointments can really be skewed, right? If you're like, well, I close 100%, I know I'll probably get that tool bag down in the comments. If that was you getting ready to type that, I hope that hurt. But realistically, if you're not meeting with a lot of people, if you're just like cherry picking the good appointments of like, well, yeah, this one sounds like an absolute laydown, then you could have like that really good metric. But I see a lot of investors try to do these things to like avoid appointments or weed them out. So they'll be like, well, you know, ballpark, would you sell your house for half of what you want, before they'll go out and meet with the person. And what I always tell the folks I'm working with, unless you have more money and more deals than you know what to do with, you haven't earned the right yet to be picky about who you'll go meet with and make an offer to. So don't slide this, in your favor. On the flip side, if somebody owes more than their house is worth and you're not doing, subject to deals or anything like that, where you're overpaying for properties, you could go meet with that person for like practice, but is it going to be a deal? Probably not. Personally, those are the only leads that I refer out to a realtor in exchange for their commission, is the ones who physically cannot afford to sell to me. The last metric that I want to address in this call is if you're wholesaling houses, what your average profit per deal should be. Now, this is one that I'm pretty passionate about because my average profit per deal used to be like $3,000. And I was like freaking broke, right? I've shared before my typical cost to find an off-market deal is anywhere from like $2,000 to $3,000. If you do the math, if it costs me $2,000 and I'm only making $3,000, I'm only really making $1,000. That makes it pretty hard to pay bills. On the flip side, if on that same deal I was able to generate, say, $20,000, I've got 17 to 18 grand just in pure income coming back to me off of that deal. So what I tell everybody I work with is the minimum like average profit you should be trying to get if you're wholesaling is $8,000. So when we're making our offers, we're building in that margin, but that's like the most we're willing to pay. So we're actually starting below that. I've got a flip I'm closing on here shortly that we'll share with you guys once we own it. But on that one, we actually got it $20,000 below our max. So it's going to end up being a super lucrative flip instead of just like, a base hit. It's at least like a double or a triple. Now, over the course of like a year for me, my average profit just on a wholesale, not counting flips or wholesales, which is where I make more money, just on a wholesale, something I'm strictly assigning, I'm making right at about $15,000. Now, that isn't every deal is 15 grand, right? That's more like I'll have one that's 4 or 5, 6 or 7, and I'll have one that's 30, and those averages end up coming together. The difference between you getting like $3,000 to $4,000 on a deal versus you getting 10 to 15 is the difference between you succeeding or failing in this industry as a wholesaler. Reason why I say that, if you're only making $2,000 or $3,000, it's really, really hard to be able to scale, market consistently, and hire staff. Versus if you're getting, $10, $15, $20, $30,000 wins, that gives you a lot of margin to be able to grow, expand, and kind of take some risks. So realistically, when it comes to doing your own direct to seller marketing, number one thing we're looking for is cash out versus cash back in. These are the metrics that I'm personally seeing in my own business. Hopefully that helps you out if you're just starting out and kind of wondering like, hey, what should I expect, right? If I drop 10,000 pieces of mail, how many phone calls could that be? So hopefully this helps give you a little bit of an idea of what to expect when you're getting started and finding your own off-market deals. Thanks for taking the time to hang out with us today. Hopefully you found this helpful. This is one of those resources that I know I personally would have killed for when I was just starting out, because like, how do I know if I'm doing a good job or not? Or how do I know if I have room or areas to improve on or not? If you found this helpful, all I'm gonna ask is that you like the video and subscribe to the channel. We'll talk to you next time.